Alrighty. Good day to all you glorious legendary resonators, you absolute lovely bastards. My name is FOXSOL, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to some more Wuthering Waves, and hopefully wherever you're at, you're having a tremendously fantastic and glorious day. In today's video, I want to dive into another topic of conversation, and the topic of conversation is going to be about power creeping. And just in general, how does power creeping affect Wuthering Waves, its characters, mainly the DPSs in the team? Because with 1.4, coming out, we have Calero going to be coming in, and there's always been arguments that's been passed back and forth, that this character cannot be power crept. There's no such thing as power creeping in Wuthering Waves. Well, I got a couple of different thoughts about it, and I say, you know what? Let's go ahead and make a video about it. So I'll just say it like this. Let's grab a seat together, let's grab a cold one, and let's talk about power creeping here in Wuthering Waves. So what exactly is power creeping? In simple terms, power creeping is when new characters, new mechanics, or even new abilities get introduced in the game at later points that are stronger, faster, and even more efficient than what came before. Over time, this does create a gap between old and new content. For example, this will make older units that you have feel less relevant and feel less strong compared to the characters that get released later on. And with every gacha game, let's put it like this, every gacha game has this, and Wuthering Waves is no exception. We've already started seeing it with the release of Jinshi in patch 1.1, Yao with 1.2, and even in 1.3 with Shorekeeper. These are newer characters that are stronger and more efficient than the ones we had at launch, signaling that Wuthering Waves is not immune to power creeping like some people will state. Now, you guys might have, heard some people around the Wuthering Waves community making some bold claims such as Wuthering Waves does not have power creeping. Wuthering Waves is immune to power creeping, but let's be real here for a minute. It's already here. It's already at our front door. Take GN, for example. When the game first launched, GN was the absolute top tier character. He was a powerhouse. He's the Unga Bunga specialist. While he's still a great character, he is absolutely not as relevant as he once was. What's keeping him, though, in the game right now is that he's the only true aerial DPS that we got. But when you compare him to newer characters like Jinshi, Zhangli Yao, you can start seeing that gap form. And that's how power creeping works. Characters like GN will slowly get edged out by newer releases. While he's still useful, he just does not have the same versatility or raw power that the newer characters bring to the table. And as more powerful units will get introduced with further updates with Wuthering Waves, the older ones will start to feel outdated. But you see, here comes the big question. Is power creeping really bad for a game like Wuthering Waves? From a player's perspective, I can see it. It is frustrating. Seeing your favorite character fall behind is never fun. But from a company's perspective, it does make sense. Because at the end of the day, a company like Kuro Games is what it is. It's a business. And like every gacha game developer, their goal is to sell characters. Each new patch introduces a stronger, flashier character designed to get players excited and, more importantly, incentivize them to pull for them. Power creep is what keeps players engaged by offering new challenges, better stats, more efficient ways to clear content. In that way, it's not inherently bad, it's just what keeps the game fresh. So, for another example, let's take a closer look at Cal versus Yao. Calero is a 5-star standard unit that you can pull for, and if you got him, you can still absolutely use him effectively. But when you compare him to a 5-star limited characters such as Zhang Liao, you'll see how much stronger that power creep has already become. Yao is an electric DPS that outperforms Calero in most every single way you can think of. His damage output, his kit, his overall synergy is all designed to maximize power in ways that the older unit just can't match it. And that's the thing about power creeping. It's not just about massive leaps of power, because that happens gradually. Each unit being 2 to 5% stronger is what's going to be expected. It's about being efficient, more efficient than the last unit. And over time, those small increases build up. And that's when you start to see the power gap between older and newer characters widen. So what does this mean for the future of WutheringWaves? Well, first and foremost, it's going to be clear that power creeping is here, and it's here to stay. With the introduction of new characters, we can expect them to be always slightly stronger and more efficient than the ones before. That's how gacha games stay alive. As Kuro continues to introduce new units, older ones like GN and Calero, they will still be able to clear content, but they won't be able to do it as quickly, possibly, and as stylishly as the newer and flashier characters come in. I mean, with 1.4 on the horizon, we're about to see another prime example of this with the introduction of Camellia. Even with the nerfs and buffs that we've seen from the original leaks to her kit is shaping up to be incredibly solid. From everything we've seen so far, it feels like basically Camellia will emerge to be one of the top DPS characters in this game, potentially rivaling Jinshi and Zhang Liao. And this goes to show that with every patch, Kuro is going to continue to push the bar, introduce new, stronger characters into the roster. So another thing that I would like to talk about, though, is that I do often hear from other sources out there when they're discussing power creeping is that certain characters are quote-unquote immune right now to power creeping because they don't have any competition in their element. For example, I've heard some say that GN, being the only true aerial DPS, cannot be power crept right now because there's no other aerial character to challenge him. But that's a bit of a misconception, if you would, when you look deeper into how WutheringWaves actually works. In this game, elemental damage only really matters when it comes to resistances. Every boss, every enemy has a 10% resistance to all elements, except for those of their own attribute. That's where they have a 40% resistance. So let's take GN for example versus the monkey boss. Because the monkey boss is an aerial element and GN is an aerial DPS, when he's going to be hitting the boss, he's going to be hitting into what? A 40% resistance. Other characters, though, when they're going to be facing the boss, will only be facing a 10% resistance against it. So the elemental advantage or disadvantage really isn't a big deal as some might think. This same principle applies to Yao versus Tempest, Jinshi versus Ju. Elements in WutheringWaves don't have an inherent damage bonus or penalty, if you would. They only affect how much resistance you're going to be hitting into. This is why the idea that a character that cannot be power crept because they're only DPS in their particular element doesn't really hold much weight. It's not about the element, it's about their kit, their stats, and the overall power compared to the rest of the roster. So when people say that characters like GN can't be power crept because he's the only aerial DPS, that argument does not apply much here since elemental damage does not play that huge of a role outside of resistances. So to go ahead and wrap things up, power creeping in WutheringWaves is already here, and it's something that we will continue to see as the game evolves. Characters like Jinshi and Zhang Liao have already raised the bar, and with 1.4 coming over the horizon with Camellia, we're about to see even more competition. So, just remember that power creeping is inevitable, but it's also what keeps the game alive and also keeps it exciting. At the same time, it's also important to understand how elemental damage works in this game as well, and realize that characters aren't immune to power creeping just because they're the only element. The difference comes from their overall kits and their efficiency, not their element alone. So, if you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting that like button, subscribe for some more content, and down in the comments section below, let me know your thoughts. Do you think power creep is a problem? Do you think power creeping is here in WutheringWaves, or is it just natural progression? Let's talk about it. So, until next time, guys, remember, keep it classy, keep it jazzy, and always keep it real. And I'll see you on the flip side. Peace.